Assalamualaikum, and thank you so much for tuning into this Slam Dunk Show. I'm your host, Tariq Ibrahim, and we have something absolutely amazing for you guys today. We have a great show with a great topic, great concept, and before we get into that, I wanted to share with you an experience, share with you something from myself, and hopefully this will be able to help you guys in your own life and in your own adventures, and really give you some sort of, bigger picture or awareness. So about a week ago, I would say, my father was actually taken into the hospital and had brain surgery happen to him. And when you look at it from a very, very, very non-biased, very, you take yourself away from the situation, you look at the situation and you study it and you reflect on it, subhanAllah, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from this event. And as the story goes, I'll bring your attention to certain things. But I really found this to be a extremely profound situation with many, 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 many different tests and many different lessons that were extracted from it. And the first thing is that the incident that led to my father's surgery started with a fall that happened almost 2 months ago. So something that happened 2 months ago had a profound effect on his health and caused extreme danger to his life. And when you think about that, the effect happened. So the fall had taken place, the injury had taken place, and he got up and continued on with his day, continued on with work, continued with everything, to the extent that no one even knew that this fall had taken place. And a major change in his life had happened, and nobody knew, and nobody couldn't tell. And the only person that knew was my father and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you take that and you look at your own life, how many things happen in our life that we don't pay any attention to? How many signs, how many times does Allah come to you and present you with something and show you something, and you've never been able to pick up on it? You've never been able to see the bounty or the blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you. And this was an extremely profound moment, because the way it happened was absolutely unbelievable, because nobody knew that my father had fell. Nobody knew the intensity of this fall and the effects it could have later on. No one could see it. Nobody could know. And no one fathomed it, to be perfectly honest. Even when the story was eventually told, nobody really thought much about it. So this is the first thing I really wanted everybody to pay attention to, is that you have to, without a doubt, pay attention to small things. These are signs, these are ni'mas, these are miracles Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you and showing you for a reason. And it's up to us to reflect on it. It's up to us to think about it. It's up to us to take in the lessons from these events. Whether it's a fall, whether it's a fail in a class, whether it's missing a certain prayer, whether it's having a family member, in some sort of a calamity. There are lessons that are constantly being taught to us, and we need to change our frequency and really be on and be ready to accept these lessons and learn these lessons. So that was the first thing that I was able to extract from this incident. The second thing, and more profoundly, and many of us that have been through the sickness that the human body can go through will realize this. But I'm just going to put it out there for those that might not realize this, but the human body is without a doubt so weak, so incredibly weak. And really it's a miracle, and it's a major blessing that the human being is actually able to go through life and live. So many things are in place that can impede you from living a healthy and fruitful life. Being able to talk, being able to walk. So many of these actions that we do have very, very high risks of damage, right? If you're walking, you can fall. If you're driving, you can be in a car accident. If you're coming down the stairs, you can slip. If you're eating food, you can get poisoned. If you're in a mall and somebody sneezes, you could get a cold. So many things are happening around us that are against us. So many things are happening that are going against our very existence. And somehow the human being is able to stand strong. And somehow that human being is able to live and wake up and go to the next day and survive and continue and live. And this routine happens, and we never stop, and we never look, and we never realize how lucky we are that we were able to survive this day, that we were able to make it through this day. Because really, what happened to my father is extremely profound. Not because it happened to my father, but just probably because it's an experience that I was able to take lessons from it and share it with you guys. But ultimately, he went out to shovel snow. A very, very simple, mundane, sometimes frustrating activity. And this shoveling had caused him to slip, which caused him to fall on his head. Now, put it anywhere else, he could have slipped and fell on his hand. He could have slipped and fell on his rear. He could have not slipped at all. But he slipped. And he didn't fall on his hands. He didn't fall on his elbows. He didn't fall on his knees. He didn't fall on his side. He didn't fall on anything except that he landed directly on his forehead. And really, the odds of even falling on your forehead, what are they? Right? So small. How did he not fall on his head? How come he couldn't fall on his hands? How come he didn't fall on his knees? Just think about all these factors, and really you're left with just being at complete, awe, and really just saying subhanallah, and really, really, really reflecting on your own life and your own activities, what you do. Driving to work, driving to school, walking to class, walking to your parents, walking to your wife, carrying your child. So many activities we do have a huge chance of fatality. And yet somehow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is keeping us alive, is keeping us breathing, is keeping our eyes blinking, keeping our lungs moving. All these miracles are happening. And we seldomly are taking note and saying alhamdulillah. So this is the second lesson I want to share. The third lesson, and quite obviously the most profound lesson, is that once the surgery took place, once the surgery happened, the first day of recovery was extremely intense. Very, very, very difficult surgery. Brain surgery is without a doubt a very, very heavy surgery on the body. And it takes a lot out of the human body. And recovery is not something that happens easily. And to give you a picture of what actually happened, before going into the surgery, my father was able to speak, he was able to eat, able to talk, able to walk, able to do just about everything. He was driving. Everything was fine. He could do any number of tasks with any amount of ease. No difficulty whatsoever. The first day after the surgery, he could not speak. The first day after the surgery, he could not move. The only thing my father was able to do the first day after the surgery was to breathe. Nothing else. He was just breathing. And it even went to the extent that his body was in such a shock from this traumatic surgery that he wasn't able to even regulate his own blood pressure. And his blood pressure dropped so significantly that he ended up having a seizure because the blood pressure had dropped so low. And it became so intense and so severe of a scenario that all the doctors and all the nurses had to rush into this room and really do their very best to bring my father back to life. It was that dire of a situation. And the only lesson one can take from this is your time on this planet, your moments in life are countable and will expire. One day, all that you see, all that you know, all that you have done, that chapter in your life will close. And your family will miss you. And your family will mourn you. But then what happens? And then what happens? The thing that is constantly being in my mind is that life has to go on. Life continued. That same day before the surgery, my father was telling me not to worry about anything and just go to work. That there's nothing here. It's not a big deal. Go to work. You need to go to work. And it didn't click. It didn't click because what do you mean go to work? How could I possibly go to work when my father is on the operating table to have brain surgery? But when I reflect more and more on it, life keeps moving. Life keeps going. And in those moments, my dad's understanding of life was clear. That whatever happens in this scenario here, life must keep going. Life doesn't stop. Keep doing what you do. And the lesson was so difficult to understand. Because what do you mean life is going to go on? How could life go on without these people that you love? How could you survive if something were to happen and your father was no longer there, or your mother is no longer there, or your wife or your husband's no longer there? How can you survive? How can you go on? But guess what? You do go on, and you do continue, and you do have to persevere, and your heart will mourn, and the memories will be forever in your heart. But life does continue, and life does go on. And it's shocking to know the reality of that statement. But that is, without a doubt, the reality that no matter what happens, somebody else is living, somebody else is continuing, somebody else is going on. And it's really, really, really a very difficult concept. And subhanAllah, this is a huge lesson. And I really am trying my very best to prepare this lesson for you guys in a nice preparation for you on a silver platter, if you will. So try and take from it. Try and understand what I'm trying to say. And the last lesson, the fourth lesson, the one that I really wanted to address, relating all to the same scenario, is that the first day after that surgery, like I said, my father was laying down on his bed, and all he was able to do was breathe. No talking, no joking, no smiling, no laughing, no eating, nothing. Nothing at all. And one day, we're all going to be faced with a situation similar to that, where everything is done, where everything was over. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you actually ready for that day? Are you actually ready to meet your Creator? Are you actually ready to answer for the good and for the bad that you have done? Because that day happened very suddenly. Although we were aware there was a surgery, although we were aware there was an operation, it still happened very quickly. If you measure in days the time from the initial fall to the time of the surgery and the recovery and its extent of its recovery, you're almost looking well into 2 months. And with 2 months' notice, you would not be able to prepare yourself. Looking back now, you're never going to be ready, is the reality. No matter what you do in life, no matter how careful you are or how aware you are or how healthy you are, you're never going to be ready. And that is a very difficult concept to understand. And I'm sure there are many people listening right now thinking about this concept and saying, well, no, I'm ready. I'm praying. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm good to go. And I challenge you with the concept is, how do you know that these good deeds were in fact accepted? How do you know that these good deeds had a good intention and ended with a good intention and had a middle good intention? How do you guarantee that? How do you guarantee that after you finish your salah or you finish your prayer, that prayer was accepted? How do you know? It's a very scary concept, but it's a lesson that needs to be studied, and it's a lesson that needs to be fit into one's schedule. Is that you just don't know. You really don't know. So you have all that, and you have this giant lesson that's being taught, and these giant lessons that you're learning. And then you come to the very end of all this, after the surgery and after the recovery. And what happens? In fact, you're reborn. My father went from not walking and not talking to slowly talking, from not talking and not walking to slowly walking. If you were to ask now how grateful one is for the ability to walk, how grateful one is for the ability to talk, how grateful one is for the ability to eat, these actions now that appeared to be so simple, so trivial, so easy, so boring, are in fact now challenges. Breathing has become difficult and is now a challenge and requires training and relearning But how? How can all this happen? How can all this be? How does this happen? And this is the beauty of our life. And this is the beauty of our deen. That subhanAllah, after all of this struggle and all of this turmoil, something amazing can happen. That something so amazing can happen, that all this can be recovered, all this can be relearned. It'll take time, it'll take patience, but it can happen. And this is the beauty of being given this life, that this life is full of tests, full of lessons. But the key here is somebody has to reflect on their life. Somebody has to reflect on the situations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting us in. You can't just look at life and be living it just with your eyes. You see all these things happening, and you just keep seeing and seeing and seeing. The reality is, life is much more than just seeing. Life is experiencing. Life is learning. Life is getting acquainted with reality. Life is paying attention to these lessons. Because the real thing that is engraved in my mind is how unbelievable this entire scenario is. The day of that my father actually went to have the surgery take place, that exact same day, we were waiting for him to come back, have dinner with us, and watch a movie. That was the plan. That was pretty much really what was going to happen. No one expected otherwise to happen. Although we were aware that he had fell, and I even Googled what could happen if you have, internal bleeding or whatever. And I read maybe you have to take medication. And I read that maybe you have to go for therapy. And I read that maybe you might have a surgery. And even when acknowledging mentally all these are options, I was in no way ready to deal with the reality that this actually could be something very, very different. It was life. And my routine in life is that my father and my mother are alive. That's what I know life to be. This is my understanding of life. My entire life right now would consist of that. And we all have our lives. We have our children, we have our parents, we have our mother, we have our father. We have all of these established relationships. And the concept that relationship is somehow fragile, that relationship is temporary, has never dawned on me in such a profound way. Now, my whole life perspective has changed. My whole realization of how unique and how special everything in life is has changed. And I have gone through a road of this magnitude before, when my children were initially born. And this is a story all on its own. But life and death and living with difficulties is not a new concept to me. But the new concept was nothing is real. The new concept today is everything is temporary. The new is temporary, and the established is temporary. And the only thing that is guaranteed is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing else. No one else. And that concept, brothers and sisters, I want you to go and reflect on this. I want you to go and ponder about this. What if you were to wake up the next day and somebody from your family is no longer there? I want you to wake up the next day and imagine if a limb from your body is no longer working. And I want you to imagine this, and I want you to really, not hypothetically, this is what you would do. You would say, alhamdulillah, and blah, blah, blah. No, really. How would you survive? How would you live? Make it real. Don't make it superficial. Make it real. And then, after you've seen the horror and you lived out this very difficult and challenging moment in time, I then want you to count each and every single blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Because only when we do exercises such as this are we then able to really appreciate life to a much more fuller extent. I tell you, brothers and sisters, I love my parents greatly. I love my family deeply. And really, I cherish all the moments I can with them. But to know that perhaps one of these moments were over was a very, very challenging thing. And the thought that that could have happened was emotionally so heavy and so difficult. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala challenges those with what they can handle. And there is never something given to you that you cannot handle. And this needs to be ingrained in your mind, put into your brain, and understood. Because life will give you the obstacles you don't want. Life will challenge you in ways you never wanted. And your job as a human being, your job as the person, is to be grateful for every single moment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And to be ready to leave. To be ready to leave. Because brothers and sisters, the time is too quick. I saw it firsthand. Time came, almost gone. Alhamdulillah. I'm able to enjoy the company of my father for more time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has deemed this was not the time. And I'm extremely grateful, alhamdulillah. But that time period, I have made it a part of my life to really focus on the lessons and look deep and think deep and try and analyze all of these things and see how one can become a stronger person. So inshallah, I will conclude with that, inshallah, that's life. That you have to look deeper and you have to ask the questions and you have to study the realities that you're in. Inshallah, I gave you a bunch of lessons from this scenario. I had a completely different show planned for you guys. But this took precedent and this really deserved all your attention, inshallah. So I hope you really open your eyes and you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you really make the best of your lives. Subhanak wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان في خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.